Hello and welcome to another episode of the Direct Booking Success Podcast. I'm Jen Boyles, your host. Thank you for being here today. Today, I have Suzanne Hacker with me. Now, Suzanne is a vacation rental business coach, and part of her business is specializing in helping people with spectrum friendly rentals. Welcome, Suzanne.
Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Oh, it's great. I'm really excited to talk to you today because this is not a topic that we talk about very often, spectrum friendly rentals. And I'm excited to dig into it and learn
Sounds
more about it. But let's start with your journey. How did you get into short term rentals?
well. I had always wanted to have a rental for some odd reason, but I had worked for this older couple throughout all of my career. It was my side job, like from the time I was 15 before I could even drive, and I helped them with all sorts of things through the years. First, cleaning, helping with a food truck, and they had rentals. They had a lot of rentals, and so that was like my first exposure to how you can get this passive income from rentals. My now ex-husband wasn't quite on the same page, and that's okay. So I had the opportunity after my banking career ended that I could start to invest in real estate. It took actually quite a while before I found the right place. But once I did, I got hooked and started that journey in 2018. With the first rental, it was a 2 block walk to the beach, and it was a big old Dutch colonial, and it was great. I really enjoyed hosting guests and that hospitality side of it. And then, having it pay the mortgage and give me a little extra income was also fabulous. So I thought, hey, this is a win win. And then I had a house that I flipped and had a lot of fun fixing that up and doing that. And then I sold them when I moved to Florida because it was warm in Florida. But it wasn't that long before I was like, oh my gosh, I miss having a vacation rental. And so I bought another vacation rental and started it again. And that was also when I started my coaching business.
Wonderful, wonderful. And you're down in Florida where the sun is always shining, I think.
Most of the time. I love Florida.
Great, great. So I really want to get into spectrum friendly rentals because this is something I know I've had Lorraine Woodward on the podcast previously. She's back in episode 69, and we were talking more about accessibility across, all sorts of accessibility issues. And we did talk about a bit about, autism and for those on the spectrum, things like that. But can you sort of explain to me what exactly we are talking about? What does it mean by spectrum friendly rental?
Yes. In order to do that, I'd love to tell you a quick story. And
Sure.
that is about a good friend of mine. Her name is Leanne. And Leanne has a couple children that are on the spectrum. And one of them is her daughter named Minnie. And one night during family movie night, Minnie's on the spectrum. And when she was 4 years old, severely autistic, nonverbal, she would not be able to tell you her name or her address or anything like that. And one of the things that a lot of children who are on the spectrum, they have a tendency to elope or escape or wander, depending on what term you want to use, which really just means they like to get out of the house and people don't know. I've had a client where she had a son. Her son often escaped and went to the neighbors, let himself into the neighbor's house and would sit down and watch television. Oh yeah, this is really common. So unfortunately, when Ninny was 4, during family movie night, she slipped out, and none of the family knew that she had slipped out until it was time to go to bed and brush her. And then it was like, where's Ninny? So my friend Leanne called her husband first and then was calling 911. And her husband called me and was like, Ninny's missing. Can you, come and help? And of course, so got in my car. I lived 10 minutes from their place, which just happened to be across the street from my vacation rental as well. So, you race over there, and fortunately, their story ended okay in that somebody saw Ninny. Ninny had decided to take herself to the beach at o'clock. And so she was found at the beach, and the cops were called, of course. But Ninny couldn't tell anybody her name or where she belonged. Unfortunately, it was a small town, but I have unfortunately heard of too many instances, where this can happen and the stories don't end as well. And I look at a lot of our vacation rentals, mine included in the beginning, where, we have our electronic keypad locks on the doors and we have the little thumb turn, inside. And if you know how children love to play with things and how easy it is to unlock those doors, That's the first concern for me, is making sure that a child cannot escape out of that house. Because imagine if you have a 4-year-old child who's on autism spectrum and you're in a strange city and the police don't know you, the neighbors don't know you, and your child goes somewhere. Just think about all of the potential horrific things that could happen. And so for me, it's the first priority is in adding extra locks to those doors, whether it's your patio door, that front door, whatever, to make sure that at a minimum, a parent would know that that child or somebody had opened the door or unlocked it. And it's really easy and inexpensive things that can be done to just, first of all, make that house safer for children who are on autism spectrum.
Wow. Well, I'm really glad that she was found safely because you can just imagine as a mom, my heart was in my was in my throat as you were talking there. My goodness. And I guess yeah, it's something we don't think about. We're thinking about safety and fire and needing to get out of doors quickly. But yeah, protecting our littlest people, not necessarily children, but people that need that protection. And I can only imagine what it was like if the police found her first and if she's not verbal, how that went. And you just want to be there to protect her, don't you?
Yeah, and little changes that we can make in our vacation rentals don't just help children that are on the autism spectrum. It can help a lot of people who have some cognitive disabilities. If you think about older people with dementia that, you may want to bring your parents or grandparents or whatever with you, but you may be concerned, you know, about their memory loss or things like.
Mm.
And that's how, you mentioned Lorraine Woodward and she's becoming rentable and the episode that she was on. So hers also addresses those cognitive disabilities and getting your home, certified as being ready to host guests with.
Yes, and I shared with her that one of the reasons I came back to Canada is because my father's diagnosed with dementia. And so I'm living with him now. So it's a daily issue that we're looking at. And in speaking with her, I realized us going away is going to be quite different now because he will get confused where he is. He won't be familiar. And
Right.
so to find a vacation rental that can help with those things is going to be so important for my family in the future. But also, I think as the public is getting older, you know,
Sure.
the generations we're getting older and our parents and as you said, our grandparents, these things are coming out. So it's cognitive issues, isn't it?
Yes. Yes. So it's not just for, children with that might be on the autism spectrum. It can help with a lot of different areas like.
And so was this story instrumental in getting you to think about this issue, especially with your vacation rental across the street from where they live? Like, is this
Yeah.
sort
Well,
of
what's interesting is that I didn't tie the 2 together when that happened. And you would have thought that it would, but it didn't. And then I sold that house and it's still a vacation rental. Somebody else just owns it and runs it as vacation rental. It wasn't until almost 2 years ago now. Wow, time flies. But I had just launched my first vacation rental in Florida and I had a family staying there at the property. And at the time, I would get pings on my watch whenever that lock got locked or unlocked. I don't necessarily do that now, but that can be a bit much. But the app that I had, with that lock would alert me, and we can turn those off, fortunately. But at the time, they were one of my first guests in that home. And I knew it was a family and I knew they had children. Well, and all of a sudden I started getting the pings that the lock, unlock, lock, unlock, lock. And it just, I'm like, and all of a sudden, it just, like, smacked me in the face. Like, if that child has autism and it's that easy to unlock the house, that it's my house isn't safe enough. And I was immediately like, I started, I sat down and I just like wrote out an outline and I started researching and I put like a training outline together. And then I sent it to my friend Leanne, who I mentioned, because she was working on getting her house ready as a vacation rental. And so I sent it to her and she messaged me back and she's like, I'm in tears. She's like, I didn't know how I was going to explain, first of all, like the extra safety things that we had put into place in our home, but also just the fact that, you're bringing awareness and attention to this. is huge because it is extremely difficult to travel when you have a child on the autism spectrum. So, like I said, I sat down, I started working on an outline, hired a virtual assistant who's also a special ed teacher who helped me just complete that training. And we put together training. It helps vacation rental owners, first of all, to understand what autism is and what some of the challenges are that families with children on the spectrum face. And then we help you to realize that, it's about locks, it's about alarms, but it's also about there's certain colors that will trigger children on the spectrum that aren't good colors to have in a vacation rental. It talks about the lighting because there are certain types of lighting that are very harsh and they're not calming. So it goes to all sorts of things like that can be helpful for families with children on the spectrum.
So, can you give us some tips on what we can do as vacation rental property managers and owners? What can we do? Easy fixes that we can do to our properties to help those that are on the spectrum.
Yeah, I would say the very first and most important thing is how hotel rooms had the extra lock toward the top of the door that, you slide over? It's not necessarily the chain one anymore, but
Yeah.
it's a more durable one. If you don't have those on your exterior doors, please put one in. That's the very first thing. Another thing that we don't often think about is making sure our furniture is anchored to the walls because children on the spectrum and even other children, they want to climb all over things,
Yeah.
and they're very curious and the difference with the children that are on the spectrum is that they don't have that same fear that maybe a typical 3-year-old or 2-year-old has. So they're going to crawl on it or they're going to try to lift themselves up on it. So anchoring that furniture to the wall is also a really big deal. The other thing is alarms on windows or patio doors. They're really inexpensive and they don't even have to be turned on. But a parent with a child on the spectrum, they will know exactly what it is and how to use it. And it's literally this big. You can see that. It's this
Mhm.
big. And there's just a little toggle switch, turn the alarm off, and then it would go off if the door was opened, or the window was opened. And they're super easy to install. And then anybody would know if either a child or even an older person, had opened that window to try to leave or something.
Mhm.
So those are the really big things. I will tell you the color that should not be used in a vacation
Mhm.
rental is the color red. Please don't have red walls because that is a trigger color, unfortunately. It's funny because my mom had her dining room walls. They were red. She had like the red accent wall and red in the kitchen. And just this last year, I was like, Mom, can we repaint that? And it's not even a vacation rental. It's just, it's like you start to realize, after you kind of do some of this research that color can be triggering and to have more calming, neutral or pink or light blues, those are much more calming, to really anybody, when you start to dig into it. So those would be like my top tips. And then my tip to people that are hosts is don't take it the wrong way or don't get offended if somebody moved a piece of furniture or a piece of artwork or something like this. I have interviewed a lot of parents, and one parent in particular really sticks out in my mind because they were going to have their first vacation in 5 years. One of her children is on the spectrum. And she was telling me how difficult it was to find somewhere that they could stay in the first place. And they finally found somewhere and they were so excited to be going on vacation. But she already knew that she was going to be going into the house before anybody else went in, and she was going to be gathering anything up that her child might be able to grab and could potentially break. And she was going to need to put it, somewhere safe. And then her son needed special sleeping arrangements. So they were going to need to move the bed up against the wall. So it's little things like that that don't assume that they just were trying to rearrange your furniture or your decor. They may have a really good reason, and that was to keep it safe from their children or somebody else. So I think that's one of the things that people often are like, why did they do that? And it's like they were trying to, protect it because they didn't want it to get broken, or they just needed, to move that bed over to make room for a special sleeping arrangement that they needed.
Yeah, I guess it's not being so judgmental into why people's done something. I took my daughter, we were on a vacation. Thankfully, it was one of my clients, so I could explain to her, but we went to stay at her vacation rental in Wales. And for some reason, my daughter decided to redecorate the place. She just moved. She had, well, I guess it's because she had her own room in this vacation rental, and she just thought this was so cool. She liked it. So she was gathering things from the rest of the house and putting them in her room. And I'm like, okay, Catherine, but we're not supposed to be doing this because it's not our house. And she just loved it. I'm like, I'm not going to know where to put everything back.
Right.
Messaged my client and said, look, I don't know why she did it, but she was making it her own. And I'm sorry, there's going to be things in different places. I did my best. So I can
I
see
love it.
it's a kid's thing, isn't it? As well as for
Yeah.
those that are on the spectrum and that wandering. I guess that wandering is the real safety concern. And yes, furniture, of course, get it attached to the
Yeah.
walls, for a
Yeah.
safety thing and TVs, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. That was the first thing I had a new client come on board for co-hosting 2 months ago, I guess now it is. And one of the first, like my first visit, and I'm in the house and I'm like, is there a way we can put that TV on the wall or anchor it somehow? So just little things like that. But you don't necessarily know if you haven't, had exposure or
Mhm.
experience or kind of heard that message before. So just those types of little things. I also have, they make these little oven locks that can keep a child, from opening the oven. And they're also super inexpensive and super easy. You don't even notice it unless like you go to use it and, but it's really
Yeah.
those little things like that. They're
Yeah,
super easy.
the things that you're talking about, it's almost making me reminisce about baby proofing my house. It's you don't really realize the things you need to do unless you're in that stage of life.
Sure. Sure.
And cognitive issues, you can't look, it's not something as like a physical disability. It's invisible, isn't it? Until you start to communicate with someone and then you go, oh, okay, there's something a bit different or whatever. But it's really interesting, this topic and how we can, make things easier for other people. I've
Yeah.
had quite a few families come to my vacation rental in England with kids on the spectrum, and a lot of them had brought dogs with them. And I remember one man, he was just so lovely. And he was like, okay, just so you know, I've got two kids. They're both on the spectrum and they both have medium to large size dogs. Is this a
Yeah.
problem? No. I said right off the bat, no, of course not. If they need their dog with them, then fine. Because I have a boat and it's very different. And for them to be able to experience this, but I have never thought about other ways I could have supported them. It's
Interesting.
just, it's can be as easy as saying yes to an extra dog, can't it?
Right. Yeah. It's so interesting. Well, and there are all sorts of little ways, and noise canceling headphones, weighted blankets, and fidget toys. And, these types of things are, they're little extras that can just make people feel a little more comfortable and at home. And because if they're flying, I don't know if you can carry a weighted blanket, really, that's a lot. Stuff in your suitcase because they're heavy for said, so I do have weighted blankets, that if they need to, they can use the weighted blanket. It's gonna cover, it washes. It's not a big
Yeah.
deal. They're just little things like that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. And it's being spectrum friendly is a niche, is the way as being,
sure.
dog friendly or couples only. Like these are niches that
Yeah.
we can really embrace. And this is something that being spectrum friendly something that can help you in your marketing, don't you think?
Right. Oh, totally. Yes. Because, there are really not hardly any rentals that would be, considered to be spectrum friendly, autism friendly, cognitive friendly. There are getting to be more as we continue to discuss the topic, but it's definitely one of those things where there's not very many. And Lorraine has some really good data, even just on accessibility as a whole and how very few rentals there are around the country in the US that are actually accessible,
Mhm.
So there's not enough.
No. And when
There's
you're
just
thinking about the rest of the world, with Europe, with smaller properties, cobbled streets, small staircases, Netherlands, those steep staircases that are like,
sure.
ladder, so
Yeah,
there's issues all over the world. So I could imagine the minute we go out of North America, the data goes down as well.
sure. Well, and it's, you know, the number of children that are being diagnosed as being on the autism spectrum is just becoming more and more. Like last year, I believe it's like 1 in 36 children. Well, I know for sure that there are not 1 in 36 rentals that would be autism friendly. So these families are renting other homes that aren't friendly and they're making do. But how great would it be if they were easily able to find a property that just had extra little touches, that made it more safe and comfortable for them and their family?
Yeah. And I think if there was a family there that was not on the spectrum, none of these things are intrusive. Not having that red wall, there's going to be no one go, oh, I really wish you had a red wall. Oh, wish that TV could fall on me, these things. So it
Right.
it's safety for all, isn't it?
Yeah, I agree.
But
It is.
talking about it on your website and your listings, talking about the things that you've got there, when people are searching
Yeah.
for a vacation rental that can help them with their family, with whatever need it is, if you were talking about it and being transparent, it could help someone. What
Yeah.
words should we be looking at using?
Well, I would say cognitive friendly would be like one of the best ways to say if you are or not, but spectrum friendly is good as well because that is very commonly used with children that with families who have children with autism spectrum, but it also covers a wide, variety of other neurodiverse type of situations. That's what I would say, cognitive friendly or spectrum friendly, just because I wouldn't necessarily say autism friendly, just because there are other things that it can, be helpful for.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, a wider range. Now, I do want to ask you about your event that is coming up, and it's called Welcoming All, and it's a
Yeah.
virtual summit on inclusive hosting. Can you tell us a bit
Yes.
more about that?
Yes. The Welcoming All 2024 Inclusive Hosting Summit. It is a virtual summit. April 6th and 7th is when it is. Tickets are free to attend. We have a fabulous lineup of speakers that I am super excited. But it is the cognitive or spectrum friendly topic is being discussed, but that's just one of many. Like we have somebody that will represent the Black community. We're going to talk about service dogs. We're going to talk about writing and communication with guests so as to be more inclusive in general. So we have a best selling author about aging in place that can really help with the senior property type of situation. So I am super excited about that summit and would love for anybody to go on over to www.welcoming-all.com to grab their free.
Great. I'll put that link in the show notes for sure. I think it's wonderful because this is not something we're seeing across the industry. We're not seeing, I think there's a real need for this, the inclusive hosting and how we can do this, how we can be more inclusive. We don't want anyone to feel left out. Now, if you're listening to this and you're thinking, oh, but my property is just not suitable, well, then fine. There's no guilt or anything like that involved in this. If it's not suitable, then that's fine.
Right.
You go on to something else. It's the same as if you want to have dogs in your property or not dogs in your property. It's looking at what your property and you are a good fit for. And I just think this is a wonderful initiative that you and Lorraine have put together.
Thank you. I appreciate you saying that. Yeah, to me, it's like, okay, if you don't have the ability for it to be more accessible as far as wheelchairs or anything like that, because you do have a lot of steps, I get it. Those are still awesome properties for people to visit. And I would never want anybody to think like, she just thinks that. No, not at all. I've stayed in so many of them that are like that as well. And I'll probably own more, that are not accessible for wheelchairs or people that are physically disabled. But there are still ways that we can all make sure we're being more inclusive, in our messaging. And because I know, like, we don't mean to offend, but sometimes we just don't know the right wording about things. And it's even, we have somebody coming on to speak who's blind. And it's like, no, I don't think we can all have braille signs in our rentals. But what's the best way to communicate with guests who may have vision impairments? And think about that. Maybe it's the digital guidebook is what's best, to be able to do that and not the binders. So it's just trying to open all of our eyes, including mine, to all of these topics about inclusivity and accessibility.
Yeah. No, I love it. I can't wait. I've already signed up. So that's welcoming-all.com. Really looking forward to that, the 6th and 7th of April. wonderful to have you on, Suzanne, and to speak about this. I do want to ask, in relation to everything that we have spoken about today, about being more inclusive at our hosting and the spectrum friendly rentals, what does direct booking success mean to you?
That is a really good question. So, I mean, I have always wanted, to have more direct bookings. And so personally, the way that I love to try to get more, is the first thing I love is the Stay-Fi that captures those emails. And maybe you don't want me mentioning companies specifically, but I have loved having Stay-Fi in my properties to collect emails. It's easier. Yes, we can still ask the guests, like, hey, what's your email address if they're staying, like, say they booked to Airbnb, because the other hosting sites don't necessarily make it easy for us to grab their email address. So, whatever you want to put in place to get people's email addresses that are staying already booked and staying at your place so that you can communicate directly with them is for me the very first, like, hello. And then our social media marketing, developing that brand of your vacation rental so people know, like, how to rebook, but to rebook directly is, to me, like, those are the low hanging fruit, if you will. But developing that overall strategy and having that always in our minds as a vacation rental, like all the little things, like your own website, your own social media accounts that, are constantly telling people about your property and directing them there. Why wouldn't we want to?
No, I
So
agree. And I
hopefully
think,
that answered your question.
yeah, no, and I think that, when we're talking about inclusivity and those on the spectrum and things like that, the more that we can embrace things, people that are looking for that help with their vacation will come and
Yeah.
stay with you, and they will come direct because they are doing the research, aren't
Right.
they?
That is true. Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
they are doing the research because they know that not every place is going to be as helpful as it could be for them and their family. So I think that the direct side of things opens it up, doesn't it? So that they can
Yeah.
Google, they can really get into
Right.
to researching who can help them, which they can't really do on the OTA platforms.
Correct. No, they can't. And especially if you're somebody that uses social media, which more and more of our guests are, and having that ability, this is what I think is so fabulous is when you have a social media account, like for your property, you can then share all of those local attractions or events that are spectrum friendly or autism friendly or, whatever your niche is. Sharing that just gets more people into your world that you can then be like, well, when you're, coming to the area, these are all the fabulous things for you to do. So that's the beauty that I see because you can't do that with Airbnb
No, you
or
can't.
VRBO or whatever platform you're going to be on.
Yes, that's right.
You just can't.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Suzanne. Thank you. You've opened my eyes. You've given me some great ideas, and I'm sure those listening the same. I will put your links in the show notes, and I just thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you, Jen. I appreciate having me. Thank you.